again, if you've got questions for Justin Dunk from 3dunknation.com, fire 'em at us as we bring him in from the GTA right now. JD, man, I was just talking about you yesterday. How are you, buddy? I was just saying, Dunk's got to be happy. He's got all kinds of news going on down there at 3 Down. Hey, I bet you are.
Yeah, it's about time, man. Can I just weigh in on the Habs Bolt series for a quick sec?
Absolutely.
Because as you know, I'm the sports anchor at CHGH TV in Hamilton on the weekends, and I've gotten a number of messages saying, hey, even though the Leafs are out, the Canadians are still playing. Can we get our Montreal content on the station? Ben Sherratt, the big D-man for the Canadians, a Hamilton native. Josh Anderson, who had the overtime winner last night, a Burlington native. So we've had a bunch of fans in our area in the GTHA craving for the Canadians to finally get a win in the Cup final. Roddy, you saw it.
Yeah, Ben Sherratt, by the way, led the way, 9 hits. He led all skaters last night for Montreal. Oddly enough, the Lightning out-hit the Habs. But don't matter. They're going to Tampa for Game 5. So to the Canadian Football League, Justin, maybe, just a recap of what's hot at 3downnation.com. Training camps are opening up on the weekend, and you obviously can feel the vibe. People are excited across this country, and CFL fans around the world.
You can see it. Certainly our readership is up since the announcement by the Board of Governors that the season is a go. And to me, Roddy, what's hot right now is COVID-19 restrictions, vaccinations, and the conditions the players are going to have to at least go into the season under, because right now all the players are in quarantine for 7 days. But one of the big reasons that Brandon Labatt decided to sit out the 2021 season, at least for now, was the restrictions. Essentially, these players, Roddy, across the country are going to be housebound. Now, part of that is because what they agreed to goes all the way back to February, but also I think the other part of it is political, that the CFL, for one, wants to make sure they can get through the season in its entirety. And on the other side, the various levels of government don't want players out and about, even though people will argue that the general public is allowed to, because they want to ensure the safety of the citizens. So it's a difficult line to walk right now, and I can understand why Labatt and potentially, others, and there's been a bunch of them, have decided not to play in 2021. But if you want to play, you know how you're going to get it done under these restrictions.
Troy Durrell watching on Facebook says, hey, JD, restrictions could change as the year moves forward, right? How would that work? We're here on Labor Day. Maybe they'll relax this a little bit.
That's right. That's kind of the timeline. They're talking, the first 6 weeks of the season, but it's really based on the presence of the virus in these communities and where we're at for the different stages. I'll get the PA memo up that I obtained that Solomon Elimimian sent out to the membership. So things can change based on a number of factors. The presence of the disease in the community, variants of concern. There's a lot of talk about the Delta variant right now, vaccination status, and the experiences during training camp, compliance, outbreaks, etc. So those to me are going to be big ones. And most importantly, how do these teams get through training camp, and can they do that without having any cases brought into the building? If they can do so, then I would think we will see some relaxed rules going into the season.
Yeah, well, it's listen, I just came back from Montreal, as you know, being around the NHL guys. This is no different than what the NHL's been going through for a year and a half, or these other leagues. We just don't hear about it as much. And their players aren't on Twitter like Terrell Singfield or Brandon Banks talking about being locked up. Whatever. That's just the way that the CFL is. But it's no different. They're not being punished. I think that's the one point. And two, I just said this an hour ago, Justin. Could you imagine having to coach this? If you're a CFL coach, because you know these guys, they're creatures of habit. They want to know what they have. You got Ottawa losing linemen left and right. Riders now this. There's more to come. There's more to come from what I hear with other teams. So, man, they are going to open camp. I don't think there's any doubt, but they don't know what their numbers are going to be, who's going to be in camp. That's the sense I got. Can you imagine having to coach this, being a position coach, let alone a head coach, with not knowing if you're going to have your full complement of players on a day-by-day basis?
That would be very tricky, and I posed that question to Riders head coach Craig Dickinson, and he had stated that indeed he does have a plan if he happens to contract COVID-19 in terms of what coach would then become the bench boss and take over those duties. And there's really only so much you can do in terms of the players because of the smaller roster sizes in the CFL. You can go to the practice roster and there's going to be an additional quote taxi squad that you can keep, but it's going to be tricky because, as you mentioned, let's say, for example, Cody Fajardo somehow gets the virus, out of his control. It's invisible. We can't see how it happens and it's difficult to track. Then you got to go to your next guy, whether he's ready or not. So Isaac Harker, fortunately, has at least a game under his belt. But overall, from game to game, it's going to be very difficult. I think the NFL going through their season last year would have given them some ways to look at how you can manage those situations. But in reality, until it actually happens, you don't know how you can get through it.
From TSN, Dave Naylor reporting, hearing that longtime CFL coach Rich Stubler's in Toronto and expected to take on a role with the Argos. It'll be interesting to see why a couple days before the start of training camp, the Argos feel the need to add Stubes, which he's a tremendous coach, obviously, but obviously there's something there that's not quite yet being reported. Wayne in Victoria says, out here in BC, we will go to stage 4 on September 7th. It means BC will be back to normal on crowd size, etc. So there's the crowd thing, there's the roster thing, and the players and keeping themselves safe. What else is going on in CFL circles, Justin?
Well, in terms of just getting the players up here, behind the scenes, some people were describing it as a nightmare. And at the best of times, it's difficult to get everything organized and players across the border in a non-pandemic world. So that's the focus right now, is getting everybody in. From what I've heard, the majority of players that are going to be at training camps league-wide are in their respective cities. And I will say that there are players like, let's say, the Toronto Argos, sounds like they're going to have their training camp in Guelph. So they're doing their quarantine there. So not only are you traveling to, let's say, Pearson Airport in that case, but you have to get out to an entirely different city in Guelph. So you got to find a way to get all of these logistics done. That's really what's taking up a lot of the time right now behind the scenes. Most of the players are in, but it's about following all of the protocols to a T so that you can get to the point where the restrictions are relaxed. So I think that's what's been really exhausting for people behind the scenes. They might not say it on the record because they want to be playing football, and a lot of them are thankful to be playing football. And I'm talking about football operations people and obviously the coaches and players as well. But there are a lot of T's to cross and I's to dot here as we work towards getting to training camp and even to the season.
Marlene Stanicki watching on Facebook says, Justin, any news on LJ McRae? If I may, before you answer that, Justin, I'm told that he has retired. That's the veteran corner out of Catawba College for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Unless you know different, that's just what I've heard.
Well, Roddy, you got your boots on the ground there in Regina, and that was the sense that I was getting. And people see the two different lists that are being used right now is either the retired list, which makes sense, it's very easy to follow, but the suspended list, I think there's been some confusion there, and that's where LJ McRae was placed. So you can only put a player on the suspended list if they don't report for any type of a team activity. Generally, obviously, that is mainly practices. So the fact that LJ McRae ended up there saves the team a roster spot in the case that he decides to come back. But you got to remember, McRae, yes, he became a starter, but that guy was on a minimum salary contract, $65,000 plus probably some incentives. I'd have to look it up to give you the details. But to him, I'm sure he looked at it and thought, well, 14 games, prorated salary, is it worth coming up there, having to pay rent in Regina and also take care of my family at home? It probably would have been best for him, and I'm sure this played into the decision, just to stay at home, and he would have come out further ahead in terms of the financials and taking care of his family.
Wow. If you don't mind taking some comments from viewers, Justin, before we let you go here. Jeff the Stamps fan says, luckily the Stampeders haven't been too hurt by these retirements. Knock on wood. And he's right. He's right. What are they doing in Calgary that no other team really has had to deal with this? They haven't had to deal with it like every other team.
Yeah, they've been a little different. I think Calgary is a much more younger team, right? And there's more of those pieces around Bo Levi Mitchell that are going to be younger with some of the guys move on, especially to Toronto. Eric Rogers might be the top one overall. But I think, they had their retirements, whether that happened before this training camp or this season was actually put into place. For example, Rob Maver, the longtime punter there, retired following the 2019 season. He was kind of reading the tea leaves anyways and had been doing some work off the field. But I think some of those things had happened. It just didn't happen in this vacuum where we've seen all of these retirements come out at once, right? A lot of these decisions had already been made, and players were either just staying quiet to try to get some Q's money, or they were making sure that they could get any signing bonus money that they had on their contracts.
From Nelson, he writes in and says, if we see players end up on a suspended list, are those opt-outs for 2021? Will choosing not to play in 2021 count against a year on your contract? I know you're talking to agents all the time. What's the buzz on that?
Exactly. So in terms of the suspension list, if you don't show up, that's where you go. And we saw what happened with the contracts in 2020 when the season was canceled, was that year ran just like it would in any other year. And because you weren't playing games means you don't get paid on that contract. So it wouldn't necessarily bump it forward. It would just be you're deciding not to play. Let's take Brandon Labatt, for example. He's decided not to play. He had a $30,000 signing bonus, I believe, on his rework deal with the Riders that got in December. So he keeps that money, but he won't get any other money in 2021. However, that 2022 year still stays intact. So I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. We're kind of running out of time. And is Devin lined up? Is she with us? Oh, she will. Okay, just a real quick one. Chris Bird in Toronto says, I think the Argos are in similar shape. Not too many guys missing due to unexpected retirement or holding out for COVID issues. So Toronto's a team that hasn't really been hit hard like the Saskatchewans, the Ottawas. Edmonton's lost a few. Any insight on as to why? Same explanation for Toronto, do you think?
Yeah, very much similar. I think they would have had some of theirs. Plus, it's a whole new regime there in the way that they've gone about recruiting players with Ryan Dinwiddie and Michael Pinball Clemens and John Murphy has made the guys want to be a part of it there in Toronto. And they feel wanted, so they're going to stay.
All right, Justin, I feel like we could go on further. Let's do it again sooner than later. I know you're busy. Everybody hit up 3downnation.com. What's popping there today, JD?
Oh, boys. Well, Bo Levi Mitchell was on a recent CBC podcast and says he's embracing the villain role when he comes to Saskatchewan. Didn't play there in 2019. The last time he was there at Mosaic Stadium, 2018, it was a loss, even though he threw 4 touchdowns. So that piece is going off right now. Marcel Desjardins said, hey, if you want to lose your money, you can bet against the Red Blacks being in last place this season. So those are just a couple of the stories that are popping off right now on the site.
I love it. All right, Justin, thanks again for all the time, man. Stay safe. See you soon.
Thanks, man. See you later.
Are we still saying stay safe? Is that a thing? Okay.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.